wasn't born.
In our last episode, we began our visit at the Kansas Barn Fest, which is dedicated to the preservation and appreciation of barns. Today, we'll continue our tour, beginning with one of the most interesting and revealing stories on our visit. It's about local Kansans helping a young New York film director create a moving Coca-Cola commercial in a barn. And it speaks volumes about the community spirit here. And it all began with an idea.
The whole process started back in like December, January of last year when I wrote this commercial that was centered around a grandfather and a grandson sort of restoring a 1965 Mustang like back in the 70s. So like during a hot summer day, they would travel to this barn surrounded by golden wheat, very like picturesque Americana.
The commercial has a strong emotional payoff, but we'll get to that later. The first step in bringing it to life was finding the right barn. When Zach put out a request for photos of barns that met his criteria, the winning photograph was submitted by Kevin Kirkwood, a farmer who operates a photography business on the side.
I was riding around with my wife and my in-laws, and we were driving down some roads, and as we drove by this barn, Larry said, "Hey, Julie, your grandfather and great-grandfather and I used to farm that land, and we used that barn." Of course, I'm like, "Really? Stop, stop."
The barn was perfect on the outside, and not so much on the inside. To make it roomy enough for a film crew to operate inside, interior walls and supports would have to be removed. A big job. Fortunately, the barn was unoccupied and all they needed was the owner's permission.
What he said was, absolutely, he said, "I'd do anything to help kids out because I hope they can do something great with it." He said, "I had it scheduled to get bulldozed down a number of years ago, and the guy never showed up." Another reason that maybe this was supposed to happen.
Things were falling into place for the production, but there was still a big hurdle to cross: money. Because this was a speculative project that would be offered to Coke in the hopes of seeing it aired, the production budget was limited. But this was Kansas, and like an old-time barn raising, the locals pitched in. As production day drew near, other Kansans donated their time, food, lodging, and props, including a work-worn old pickup and a beautifully restored Ford Mustang. In fact, the grandfather in the commercial is actually a grandfather who lives a few miles away. The out-of-towners were astounded by the help they received, which Zach shared when he returned to premiere the finished commercial.
As you've seen here tonight, it took months and months of work and the dedication and unbelievable, like indescribable generosity from people here in Kansas. Like, I've never seen it before. Luke and I have shot all over the U.S. We've worked in other countries, but I've never been prouder to produce anything or shoot anywhere other than here in Kansas.
And here's how the commercial turned out. So what did Coca-Cola think of the commercial? We'll let you know at the end of our tour. But right now, it's time to get back on the road. Next stop, the J.S. Hollinger Farm, owned by Jim and Jean Wohler. Let's go. On the way, while chatting with some of the people on the tour, we discovered a category of barn we hadn't heard about previously, the ghost barn.
It's where a barn's been lost to lightning or tornado or whatever, but all of the history is there and all of the photographs. And sometimes they're really important because they're a link to other barns in the area and all. So we keep the ghost barns alive.
Thankfully, the beautiful old barn at the Hollinger farm was still standing. It was built in 1882 and constructed in an unusual L shape. The property was purchased by Jim and Jean Wohler in 2009. Jim's a carpenter by trade, and he's been restoring it ever since. We asked him a question that's been on our minds since we began our Kansas trip.
So we've been traveling around Kansas and have noticed that all the barns have these little structures that protrude out. What is that?
That was to allow the large hay hook that traveled on a track up along the roof line to come out, drop into the hay rack, grab the hay up. That loose hay was on the wagon, haul it back up, and then would be dumped inside so you could put the hay up into the loft.
Having solved that mystery, we took a look at the ground floor, poking around its multiple stalls and storage areas. But the most striking thing about the barn was upstairs.
Look at this. Amazing. I mean, I can imagine having a studio up here, an apartment, a barn dance, anything. It's spectacular.
And then Jim's wife, Jean, showed us a room that would make a lot of you guys out there envious.
And this is his traveling workshop. He can just back up the trailer up there and then load what he needs to go into town and to go do his job.
This is like every man's dream in here. This workshop. Check it out.
Still got a little bit more to do outside, but yeah, not enough hours in the day.
Woo, Nellie, we got some wind going on here today in Kansas, but we are on our final stop of the Kansas Barn Fest tour, the Bellevue Farm, home to 5 generations of the Taylor family. The barn has special meaning to Terry Taylor, whose family built that barn in 1919, then sold it in 1970, and a few years ago had the opportunity to buy it back. Terry explained to us what makes this barn special.
Well, this barn was a dual-purpose barn. It had hay storage with loose hay in each end, but it also had grain storage. And so grain could be dumped into a pit and then elevated up to the upper floor. And there was grain storage there for several different varieties of grain. That was done even 30, 40 years ago. It was still used for grain storage. It had an elevator in there to elevate grain.
Nobody was happier to get this special barn back in the family than Terry's mother, Joyce. She'll be putting her personal stamp on the building with that new barn quilt she's holding.
And I call it twice around the block, as you will notice how it is woven with 2 to make 2 squares.
And you designed this yourself?
I had a pattern, but I just changed the name of it.
But it will go up on the big hay door here, and we're going to have the hay door repainted. We're going to mount that up there, the quilt, and I think that'll be kind of something that would be neat for people to see as well.
We love Wild Barn! Well, that concludes our trip to Kansas. Oh, and that Coca-Cola commercial? Check out our website at wildaboutbarns.com to find out.